Alrighty. What is up, everybody? Welcome to our Deep Dive podcast. My name is Nick Griffin. I am the lead pastor here at Wayfarers Christian Church. I'm joined today by Ashley Wakefield.
Hello.
Everybody's fan favorite. I always got to include that part in it. Producing this show, behind the scenes, not on camera if you're watching this on YouTube, is our teaching pastor here at Wayfarers, Noah Randolph.
Hey, everybody.
He's got the much nicer mic, so he's got a really low voice here. And our special guest today is Lizzy Bliffen. Say hi to everybody, Lizzy.
Hello.
If this is your first time tuning into this podcast, usually we use it as an opportunity to do deep dives on the sermon topics that we have been covering in our Sunday services. Over the last, I guess it's been a few months at this point, right? We have been, instead of doing deep dives into scriptures, we've been doing deep dives into people's stories. We're calling this series our Backstory series. Just been an opportunity for people who have been attending Wayfarers and a part of what we're doing to tell their stories a little bit. And so today, we've got Lizzy with us here to tell us your backstory. So thank you, Lizzy. Thanks for coming, telling the story, telling your story. It's I'm not sure where you want to start exactly. I feel like one thing I will say at the beginning, I said this with one other guest before, but just to give you guys some context, Lizzy probably knows me longer. I would say she definitely knows me longer than anyone else who is involved with Wayfarers at all. She mentioned in her backstory that she's part of a missionary family. Her parents were on the mission field together with my parents in Uruguay, and Lizzy was around when I was first born. So she's known me literal day one. Lizzy has known me. So I'm not sure where you want to start your story, Lizzy. Do you want to go back? You want to go back then?
To the beginning.
Are we going to go pre-Nick Griffin, before...
Pre-Nick Griffin. You're going to tell us all the embarrassing things about Nick.
Yeah. I would appreciate keeping some of those embarrassing stories to a minimum, but whatever. However you want to go about it. Where do you want to start?
I mean, we could probably start with a more specific question of being raised in a missionary background. What does that look like as a kid? I think a lot of people that I've talked to that are missionary kids have negative experiences with that, actually. So I'd be curious to hear some of the beginnings of that and what that was like for you. Was it positive and those types of things?
Sure. It was very positive, actually. I had a really positive outlook because I enjoyed all of the traveling that we did. I enjoyed meeting all the new people. I really enjoyed the whole sharing the gospel with people. That was something that I always looked up to my dad for doing, and just anybody he meet, he was sharing about Jesus, and that was something that I always treasured, and it's always something I held dear. Also showing God's love, that was in everything that we did. We were showing God's love to anybody we were around, and so that I always loved. And it actually helped me in my walk with Jesus because, it was a lot of reminders of, oh, yeah, he even loves me, too. He doesn't just love all these people who have failed, but he loves me, too. I have failed, too. So that was a great outlook on that.
So what were some of the places you all went, and what did you do when you all were there, when you did missionary work?
Yeah, so we were in Uruguay, South America. We were also in Miami, Florida for most of my life. And my dad took a lot of trips to places like Cuba, Puerto Rico, a lot of different Latin places. And I was also in Spain with my parents for a little while after college, and that was a great experience as well. Most of my time was in Miami, Florida. I grew up there, basically, and then I actually came here to Mid-South Christian College for college, and did some ministry with Nick with Avenue Coffee.
Yeah. Cool. I always feel like we got to mention that Lizzy was one of the OG Avenue Coffee team members who helped. She came up with the name. You can credit Lizzy with Avenue Coffee as the name.
I did, yes.
We were in a meeting trying to figure out a name. I'm terrible at naming things. And Lizzy was like, what if we called it like Avenue Coffee or something? And we were just like, that's it. It was one of those like awesome moments where we're like, yeah, that's it. So
She needs to be getting royalties for that.
yeah, I know. So yeah, you said you had positive experiences. That is a really cool point you said about like you were so used to telling other people the good news that sometimes maybe it was helpful and maybe even hard to remind yourself that good news is good news for you too, not just for the other people that you were sharing it with. Yeah. But you said you did grow up, the majority of the time you guys were in Miami, which we did my backstory last week, and I briefly touched on that because my dad and your dad started this Hispanic church in Miami. So it was in Miami, Florida, but it was geared towards Latinos and Spanish speakers, and the whole all the services were in Spanish, songs are in Spanish, everything else.
So were you all in Miami at the same time or a different time? Oh,
it's the same time.
Oh, okay.
And so my dad left that church plant to come be the president at Mid-South Christian College. Lizzy's dad, John, stayed and I guess essentially became like the lead pastor there
basically
for the next few years. So do you remember what ages were you there in Miami for?
Yes. So we moved there from Uruguay, South America, when I was 5. Well, okay. So we went to Ohio for a year.
Okay.
And that was after we found out that I had diabetes, because we actually found that out when we were in Uruguay. And found out that my dad had fibromyalgia. So that was kind of the reasons why we left Uruguay. And then we went to Ohio for like a break, a furlough type thing. Then after that year was up, so I had probably just turned 6 when we moved to Miami, Florida. And then I left there. I was like 19, I think.
Okay. So from like 6 to 19, you were in Miami. Do you have any memories of Uruguay, really?
A little bit. I honestly, my memories are from right before we knew I had diabetes and on. I don't really remember a whole lot.
Sure.
And I was 5 years old when we found out.
Yeah, I don't know that I realized that you were diagnosed and it was discovered that you had type 1 diabetes when you were in Uruguay still. I don't know why I never caught that part of your story. So, they always say a lot of our earliest memories maybe have to do with difficult experiences that we go through.
Yeah.
So it sounds like some of your earliest memories are tied to that diagnosis and some of that other kind of stuff after that. So
Definitely.
What do you remember about that, that experience?
Yeah, I actually have an interesting memory. So I know one memory I have was like running in a park, and I think it was a church activity. I remember somebody, saying hi to me or something, and I was running, and my mom actually has a picture of me on that day, and we looked back at it at one point, and I was like skin and bones, but we had no idea that I was sick. And then I remember actually before I went to the hospital, I had actually passed out. And it was actually your dad who told my mom to take me to the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought it was a dream for the longest time, but I have a memory of like seeing a white light and someone telling me, it's okay, you're going to be okay. And at first I asked my mom, like later on in life, I asked her, hey, did you tell me that? And she's like, well, I don't really remember, but I prayed for you. And I was like, I wonder if that was God or an angel or something, So that was an interesting memory I had.
Yeah. And so your parents decide, you get diagnosed. Your dad also gets diagnosed with fibromyalgia and a few other things. Being overseas on the mission field is difficult. They come back to Ohio for a year, and then Miami after that. Do you remember, because at this point then, it sounds like most of your memories of most of your life has been being diabetic and having that as a part of your life. How do you remember that affecting you as a kid? Do you remember feeling maybe more aware of how dangerous it is? I've talked to my wife, Adrian's also diabetic, so I've had conversations with her where she said, she had to like face death earlier than a lot of other people because she knew it was always a possibility. And just the difficulty of always feeling different, maybe in some ways, than other kids. Do you have any memories associated with that?
Yeah, I've had a couple of instances when I have passed out, and from early age, and well, of course, the first time, when they diagnosed me, but then many times after that, just because we were still learning, all of it, and so I've had many like near-death experiences, but every single time, like, there was always something that happened that kept me from dying. Like, there would be many times I had like low blood sugars, really low blood sugars at night, and I would just wake up, and every time I just thought, well, God's waking me up, because otherwise I would not know.
Yeah, because I've heard sad stories. Adrian has some friends who their blood sugars dipped really low while they were sleeping, and they just never woke up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that being able to like wake up and address the low blood sugar is a pretty crazy thing. And so you were thankful that God.
So how did that have an effect? Did that have any effect on your relationship with God, or how did your parents step in and explain the concept of death at such a young age, or did they even do that at all?
I guess I always had an understanding because of those experiences of God watching over me, and it was always like, God's taking care of me, and so I never really I was never really scared of things, like going out of town by myself, or any little things. I was never really scared. Now my mom was always worried about me for every little thing. But I always told her, I'm fine, God's with me, I'm okay. So I think that kind of helped me just trust in him more, even at an early age.
Okay.
So,
cool.
That is a cool difference that I would say that was not a part of my story. Like we talked about in my story, I did not have that just natural trust, and I like that you did. That's always really cool. So to get back to Noah's question, you talked about some of the positives that came from growing up in that missionary family, growing up around the church, growing up being able to trust in the Lord and know that he was going to take care of you even through some of the scary stuff with diabetes and stuff. Do you remember any negative experiences or negative feelings that came about with being the pastor's daughter or the missionary kid that came about with that?
It's interesting because when we were with the church in Miami, the church plant, and I think this was after you all had
We'd already come back to Memphis.
But I remember having interesting relationships with the youth, because of course, and I'm the youngest out of three, so I have a brother and sister who are older than me, and they are all really good friends with the youth because they are all around the same age, and I was the youngest out of everybody. So that was always interesting. And so I was the baby and I was the pastor's daughter. So it was a lot of, she's the goody good, or she's the baby, so she can't be around us during this time. So that was always kind of a negative thing. I kind of felt like left out of some things. But
did you find yourself trying to prove that you were like more mature and more grown up than the way they treated you? And you're like, no, I am old enough to talk about this stuff.
Right. And it's interesting because a lot of the times I was more mature than they were. But I didn't want to tell them that. But
Sure.
So, but I did. Like, there were times that, they were talking like about the Bible and our little lesson or whatever, and they would be giggling, and I'd be like, okay, let me answer the question then. And so I would be like, I'm the smart one. I'm the one who knows all this stuff. So it was fun, but
So was there ever a point like where they finally stopped treating you that way and realized, she's a lot more mature than we thought she was? Like,
I don't remember any specific time, but I think it was kind of a gradual thing, especially as I got older and they're like, oh yeah, she's, teenager like us. Okay.
Yeah.
She kind of rolls like we do. And, so, and one thing also, my brother and I, we were really close. So, and the youth was mostly his friends, like, it was Lizzy and the boys basically.
Yeah.
And I was like a tomboy most of my life, so I played sports all the time with them. And so it's interesting, as I got older, it was not like, oh, this is not just Lizzy, JT's baby sister. This is Lizzy, cool girl kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was interesting. Yeah.
And so do you remember feeling any pressure from how people looked at you, knowing that you were, the pastor's daughter or even JT's sister or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually felt a lot of pressure, and it was really more so of the pastor's daughter type thing. It's like any little thing you do, it's a bigger deal. And even sometimes I was blamed for things that I didn't even do. And it's like, oh no, you're the one who did that, but I didn't even do it. And so it is interesting because I guess I was viewed as a role model, but at the same time the easy one to blame. Wow. And it's very interesting, and I'm not sure that thought process, but it was just really interesting because I was either like the one like, oh no, she's the good one, or oh no, she's the bad one who did that thing.
What's an example of something like where someone blamed you for something that you didn't do?
Okay, so I actually was thinking of a story when I said that. So there was this one time, there was another missionary family who was working with us for a little bit of time. There was a time when the grandma brought a thing of sandwiches, just a plate of sandwiches. And, she's like, okay, don't let anybody eat these because this is for later. Okay. So I didn't eat them, but her granddaughter came over and was with one of the other youth, and they ate the sandwiches. And I'm like, we're not supposed to eat that until later on. And they're like, oh no, it's okay, we can eat some. I'm like, okay, but I told you. And so then later on, I'm the one who got blamed for eating the sandwiches. And I felt so bad about that. I was like, I didn't do it.
So was it the girls that blamed you, or was it just their grandmother that just assumed?
The grandma that assumed that I did it. And I don't know why, but
I don't either. Maybe sometimes people always assume that like the minister's kid is the worst or something like that.
Yeah.
And so maybe they just assumed you were kind of rebellious in that way.
Yeah.
So I know you talked about whenever we were in school together, and you would share a little bit about your backstory, that you had, you grew up in the church the whole time. Do you remember how old you were when you were baptized, when you made that decision to follow Jesus?
Yeah, I was 8 years old.
8 years old.
Yeah.
And so made that decision as a kid, but then you told us before that once you got into your teenage years, you started to kind of stray from that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you want to share any aspect of that or parts of that? What led to that, you think?
Honestly, I think puberty.
Sure.
I was into sexual sin, and I can't count how many people I was involved with in that way, and so I really led astray in that area. And honestly, I honestly think I dealt with it mentally ever since I was a kid. Which is really weird because I always had thoughts like that when I was really young, and I never knew where it came from because of course, like, we were missionary kids, so it's not like our parents are talking to us about that kind of stuff, and we didn't really hang out with people like that, so so I'm not sure where the thoughts came from, but I always had stuff like that in the back of my mind. And so I think the thoughts were always just building up.
Sure.
And then when puberty hit, it's like emotion and thoughts like crash, and dealt with that. But yeah.
And so do you remember feeling like there was a disconnect there? Like you're going through feeling all of these really strong emotions, all of these strong temptations that are pulling you in all kinds of different ways. Mm-hmm. But I assume you were still having to help your dad at the church, and you know, you've always played music, so I assume you probably had to still play with the worship band and various different things like that. Do you remember feeling weird about that, or what were the emotions you were feeling?
Yes, I felt worthless. I felt like a horrible person. And the problem was these temptations were so strong and these emotions were so strong in me that it was almost like I felt like I couldn't help it. Mm-hmm. But I just felt so horrible about it. And it was always immediate after I did something. Mm-hmm. I've always felt horrible. And then I would have like, I would have voices in my head telling me how horrible I was. And I always thought of that as like demons telling me, like, because I would hear the voices in my head telling me how horrible of a person I was. And I remember so many nights just crying and begging God, please forgive me. Like, I know I'm so horrible. Like, please forgive me. And it took me a long time to realize, he already forgave me. You know, he loves me. He already forgave me. And he just wants me to try to connect back with him.
So what do you think helped you come to that realization of the forgiveness that you could feel from God? Do you have any particular moments that you feel like helped you learn that?
Yeah, there was a couple of moments. I remember one, there was a youth pastor that we had in Miami, Florida, who he, you know, I mentioned, you know, different things that I was dealing with, the sexual temptations I had and all those things. And, you know, he sat down with me one day, his wife and me, we sat down together, and he, you know, just went verse and verse and verse and passages of forgiveness and love. And he just kept going on and on and on. And then when he was done, he was like, you see, God still loves you. And he's still here with you. You just have to take the step to, you know, forgive yourself and then let him forgive you, because it was really all on me. You know, like I wasn't letting him forgive me because I kept putting all of that, I'm horrible thoughts in my head. And so that, you know, once I realized that, I was like, okay. Yeah.
And how old were you when you came to that realization?
That time was, there's a couple of times. That time was, I believe I was 18. The next realization I had, because of course I fell again, and I had a few things leading on to the next time. I was wanting to be in the mission field, and I was ready to work in Spain with my parents. I wanted to, you know, join them with their team. And the missionary group that I was going to work with, they didn't really believe in me. And there were many times when they told me that I'm only going just because my parents are there. Like, I'm not going because I feel a drive to be a missionary and to reach these people in Spain. It's like, no, I want to reach these people. Now, yes, my parents happen to be there too, but I want to work with them. Like, I want to, you know, reach to these people. And it ended up being to where they didn't even communicate with me anything that I needed to do as far as like the process of fundraising or anything. They just wouldn't talk to me. And so I was really hurt by that. And so in my rebellious, you know, state, I kind of took that as, well, you know what, fine, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. And so I ended up meeting my daughter's dad, and we got together, and I just honestly, that was a moment where I just didn't care. I just didn't care. I was just going to do whatever made me feel good in the moment. And so, had sex with him plenty of times and had Alina. And which, of course, that's an interesting point because she's like the biggest blessing in my life. But, even though I did something that I was not supposed to do, something that's a sin, God still gave me a blessing. And so that kind of helped me get some realization. But also when I told my parents that I was pregnant, it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. But I told my mom first because she was there first. Then afterwards, I told my dad. Then my dad told me that he had a dream that God told him that I was pregnant.
Wow.
Like it was a prophecy, Lizzy is pregnant. And so my dad already knew. And as soon as I told him, he told me he had that dream, and he hugged me and he said, "I love you." And that was the opposite of what I thought was going to happen. I thought I was going to die. So those were, the youth minister who approached me and my dad, telling me that he loved me. Those were two big moments of like realizations.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just so confused about why they would exclude you like that. Because when I first heard it, it just sounded like jealousy, which I may be overreaching, but that's just what it sounded like. But did you have problems with those same group of kids, like in the church, like in the church family? Like, was it just in that moment that you had problems with them, or were there other moments that you had problems with them as well?
You're talking about going back to like youth group days and things like that?
Like youth group days. I honestly I didn't have any issues. And I don't know if maybe there was some jealousy. I don't know. It's something that we never really discussed. I never really went to them and was like, "Hey, I'm feeling these things," because I didn't know how to do that. But I don't know. It could have been jealousy, or it could have been just, the fact that I was younger.
Yeah.
I was probably a good few years younger than them. So, that could have been a big part of it too. But, I really don't know, to be honest.
Because I don't know, and I don't like to make assumptions, but I guess sometimes people, when they see somebody younger doing the same thing they're doing, it can come across intimidating, I guess. I guess that's how I see it, because it seems like, why is it that you are so much younger than me, but then you're doing something that
you got it more figured out?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. But I wanted to know, like, are you still in touch with her father, like the baby's father, or your daughter's father? Or?
Yes, we actually have a great friend relationship, and we are co-parenting. And from the beginning of that whole thing, I told him, because we actually broke up when I was 4 months pregnant, and that was a really hard thing, and that was a part into the depression that I had. And I also had postpartum, and I also felt like a horrible person. So, all of those mixed together, it was a hard depression. But yeah, we're great, and we both decided we're just going to take care of Alina, and we're going to be friends, and we do really well at that. And Alina, you could tell, because I can tell that she feels loved, no matter whether she's with Mimi, which is who I am, or with Daddy. So yeah, it's really cool.
That's an interesting thread you're noticing there, Ashley. I think that I hadn't really picked up on, but I'm wondering if maybe the experiences of feeling left out that you felt like you had when you were younger is what made the work later on with the missions group cut so deep, in a way, because it was almost like they didn't accept you and didn't want you to be a part of what they were doing in a way. And, all the things we experience, they leave those sort of emotional scars that people can sort of unknowingly reopen some of those wounds. And I'm wondering if a part of that is there. I want to dive into that part of it especially a little bit more, but before that I wanted to we've got a little bit of a gap here in the middle. You talked about this experience you had when you were 18, and this experience you had a few years later after graduating college and all that kind of stuff. But before diving into that, I want to cover that gap in the few years before that. So was that experience you had at 18 and starting to really feel forgiveness for some of the temptations and difficulties that you were going through, was that what led you to wanting to come and to pursue ministry for coming to school here at Mid-South, or what was the impetus for that decision?
That was part of it, because I actually wanted to be in some type of ministry for as long as I can remember. I remember seeing how my dad would approach ministry and how he would, be with, helping a lot of different people and speaking with them. And I remember seeing that and wanting to do the same thing, maybe not at the same capacity, but, somehow do the same thing, reach people. And so it's something that was always in my heart. Figuring out how exactly I was to do that is something that I'm still trying to figure out now.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah, but that was part of it.
And but at least at the time, one of the decisions you wanted to do is you wanted to go to Bible college, and you ended up here at Mid-South.
Yeah.
Which your dad also works here. And was working here at that time. Did you guys come at the same time? I don't remember exactly what the timeline was with that.
We did. It was interesting because I first decided to, go to Mid-South. Then my dad talked to your dad and got a job here. So I was like, okay, well, I guess that works.
You're following me there.
Yeah.
Because you probably had the same experience I did of the weirdness of going through your college years with your dad not only working at the school but being like in the administration of the school. And
and what did you major in when you came here?
I did the VCL program as well.
Okay,
so
cool.
we were actually in the
Christian
same
leadership. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we started the same year. We were on that same team together, and we did the 4 years together through there. And so during your college years, you were trying to kind of define what you wanted to do, and we as a team were working on our project with the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And one that I still remember that time whenever the coffee shop was about to get started, and we were kind of deciding exactly what we wanted to do, and you kind of informed us on the team that you had some other plans and other things that you kind of wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so a few of us from the team stayed with the coffee shop, but you went off to focus on some other things. And I'm trying to remember, but at the time, was it the missions work? Is that kind of what you were envisioning seeing yourself doing at the time?
Yeah, that's what I was envisioning, and ended up being that I also needed to get a job that I could pay for my medications and stuff, because we were struggling financially in that area too. So we were definitely not making a lot of money in the early years of the coffee shop, and it's a whole other podcast we could do about the medical system in the U.S., but let's just say a diabetic cannot function on that. So I remember those kind of being a part of it. But yeah, that's what I thought. You already kind of had, because I remember it when we were in school, you were always talking about your desire to do missions work and to like reach people in the world, with the gospel. Definitely.
So you got a different job, so paid a little bit more money, and then started kind of the process of seeking out this missions organization and trying to go. And your plan at the time was to try to go to Spain. Yeah. Which at this point, your parents had already ended up in Spain doing mission work there, and that was kind of your goal. And like we said, for whatever reason, the missions group was just like not proactive at helping you do any of that, So did they just kind of like leave you on the hook, or leave you hanging, and just not give you the information you need on fundraising and on various different things like that? Or kind of what was the lack of communication you were experiencing with them?
I feel like it was kind of like leaving me on the hook, to just figure it out by myself. Now, and I'm not sure what happened as far as, why there was the miscommunication. Right. But I do remember there was one gentleman who was, speaking through emails, talking with me some about, some
coordinating
of my growth,
a little bit,
some of the coordinating and that sort of thing. And so I was speaking with him, and then the person who was in charge of like fundraising type thing, trying to figure out, how are you doing? Do you need help in this area? I just never heard from them. And I would email him and his wife and wouldn't hear anything back.
Yeah.
And so it was just, okay, well.
Yeah.
And then there was a time that I needed to go to a training that, they had for, any of the new missionaries. And I went to the training, it was at their headquarters, and I went there, and they're like, "Oh, you're here?" I'm like, yeah, I registered.
It's like they weren't expecting you.
They weren't expecting me. And it was like, well, dang. So I don't know. It was just a lot of, you're not even expecting me to be here. You're not, you're not, I don't know if it was that you're not paying attention to me or you're just not focusing on me, something to that effect is what I was feeling.
And so, obviously that hurt. That's tough. That's something you had spent years talking about what you wanted to do, and now it felt like you weren't getting the help to kind of make that happen. Yeah. And like you said, you just kind of were like, all right then, well, I'm just going to not care about any of it. I'm just gonna
so is that something, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, did you feel like that was something you struggled with, like, up to your life at this point, or to a certain point, like the idea that people just didn't include you or pay attention to you or take you seriously? Yeah, I think it was more so the take me seriously type thing, because it was like there were a few times where there were, I think, maybe 3 different individuals who would come up to me and talk with me and be like, we just feel like you're only doing this because your parents are there in Spain. That is the only reason why you're going to Spain. It's like, no, that's not the only reason. I'm trying to tell you that this is not the only reason. Like, I want to reach these people. And I think they just didn't believe me,
Yeah. And so people weren't taking you seriously, weren't believing you, and that was your reasoning. And so you kind of checked out and decided you were just going to not care about any of it anymore at that point.
Yeah.
Was it sort of premeditated, or was it more like, oh, I'm just going to go on autopilot and do it as it happens? Or like, because I'm trying to understand how like being angry at people in that situation led to a more like, it almost sounds like anger at God and Christianity even. Like how did all that kind of relate to each other, I guess?
I was angry at Christians, not necessarily God or Christianity, because I still held that dear, but I was angry at Christians.
Yeah.
And so, and I guess these particular Christian people. Yeah. And there were people that I had known for so long, because they worked with my parents for as long as I've been alive.
Right.
So I've known them all this time, and it just hurt deep, because, these are people that I've known all of my life, and they just didn't take me seriously and didn't pay attention to me. And so I guess I just felt like, wow, is this how it is in missionary work? Like, do they just not care that much? And I went to an extreme, I kind of, backlash in an extreme, and I wouldn't say it was premeditated, but it was just a lot of hurt, a lot of hurt feelings, and I was just done with it. I was just done with people, and I was like, well, you know what? I'm not going to live up to anybody's expectations. I'm just not going to care. I'm just going to do what I want to do. What I want to do, and what makes me feel happy in the moment. And that's where I derailed badly, because I was thinking of the moment and not of like the long term.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, you're frustrated by being overlooked by so many people that you're like, well, I'm going to quit worrying about what they want, and I'm just going to do what I want. And that was kind of the emotions you were feeling in that moment. So it kind of led to some of the decisions. And so obviously, whenever you do find out then that you're pregnant, this is, it's like do you feel like it just kind of like woke you up from this rebellious stage that you were in because you can't hide it, or like what was the feelings you were feeling then?
Well, it did wake me up a lot. And definitely can't hide that. And I knew that I hurt a lot of people, and I knew that I was going to hurt a lot of people when I told them, hey, because I also wasn't completely honest about being in a relationship, because honestly, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I was just, I was in the moment of, I don't care, what happens. I'm just going to do whatever. And honestly, I don't want to tell people because I don't care, And so I was in a really dark, rough spot. And so a lot of people got hurt because they didn't even know, like they probably suspected, but they didn't really know because I didn't fully tell them, hey, I'm in a relationship with this person and this is what we're doing. And, oh, oops, I'm pregnant.
Yeah. So like some people, the first time they even found out you were in a relationship was when they find out that you were pregnant.
Right.
And so there was a lot of story going on in the background that they weren't aware of necessarily.
Sorry. Do you think that like it took that for you to wake up from what you were doing, or do you feel like had it not come to that point and you still continued the relationship, do you feel like you eventually would have moved out of that phase of anger, or do you think it absolutely had to happen the way it did for you to move out of that phase?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if it had to happen that way, but I think God used that to get me out of that anger and that rebellion. Maybe it had to happen that way. And I honestly, I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
But I think maybe God was like, okay, maybe this is the only way I can get her to see, hey, you don't have to be angry anymore. You don't have to just do whatever. Like, you can trust in me again, like you did before. You can trust in me again, Yeah, he definitely used it though.
Yeah.
Did your relationships with the people at the church kind of change when they found out you were pregnant?
It did for a while. There was actually a specific church I was helping out before. I was kind of back and forth with different churches for a while, but there was one specific church I was helping for a while, and ended up that once I told them that I was pregnant, I was not allowed to help that church anymore. And so, which I understood, I sinned, and so that's a natural thing. Like when you are either volunteering or you are a part of a worship leading or, any type of ministry type thing that you're either helping with or you're in charge of. If you do something big like that, then they're like, well, you can't be a part of this anymore because you have negated from what you were supposed to do. You're not being true to being a Christian because you have done that big thing. Even though all sin is sin, but there are some sins that are more evident.
Yeah.
So, it was just one of those things where they felt like, no, you cannot help us anymore.
Right.
And so that hurt too.
Yeah. And so you had a great experience with your dad.
Yeah.
Which was the opposite of what you were expecting when you told him.
Right.
And he just told you he loved you, had this, and it was a overwhelmingly positive experience for you. It sounds like to feel that love from him.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like throughout it, you have some experiences that were more negative than, I guess, especially with other Christians.
Yeah. There were others that wouldn't talk to me for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so, those were the people that I really hurt, and because I wasn't completely honest about the relationship, and so, so they heard, oh, I'm in a relationship and I'm pregnant,
right.
And so I know that hurt them a lot, and so, but then the return was, I'm not talking to you. And, kind of pushing me off. So like they felt like I was pushing them off because I wasn't completely honest. Well, I felt like I was being pushed off from them because
they quit talking to you.
Quit talking to me, But the good news is that we were all talking again. Everything's good now. It just took a while.
So it sounds like it wasn't so much the pregnancy that turned him off. It was the idea that you just didn't tell us what was going on. So was it like just the secrecy of it that was such a turn off to them, or?
I think so. Okay. I think it was more so the secrecy and not being completely honest. And I think if I would have been honest with them, like in the beginning, like I'm seeing this person, they probably wouldn't have been so hurt about the fact that I got pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is this is going to be a long question, so bear with me on this one.
Yeah.
But currently in culture a lot, there is a very, I would say, antagonistic movement towards Christianity for a person in your story. Typically, especially from women that I've talked to outside of the church, they often feel like the church is always blaming the woman for the sexual misconduct, not the man.
Yeah.
That's usually their first point. And then the second point is that this ultra sexual judgment for sexual sin is higher than other sins in the church. And for them, at least, they see that as men telling women how to live, basically. And I'm curious, from your perspective and your story, do you see that? And what would be your response to someone that's left the church as a result of that?
Yeah. Because you kind of took I was about to ask a very similar question. so I'll just piggyback mine on there too.
Yeah.
Which is that that is part of why I wanted you to talk about your story, because I know so many other people who had the same experience as you did.
Yeah.
And because of those are just not in the church anymore, or are not Christians anymore. And what I respect so much about you is that you were hurt by so many people, but you, like you said, now you've allowed yourself to come back into relationship with some of these people that hurt you. And, I assume there's some forgiveness that had to go on there to really kind of mend those relationships.
Yeah.
And you are here helping us out with the stuff we're doing here at Wayfarers and at other churches that I know that you work at. So especially as like an encouragement, what do you think kept you from going that direction, that so many people who are very validly hurt feel the same pains that you felt, but make different decisions than you did? Why do you think your decisions were different?
Yeah. So there's a few questions there.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's great. All good questions. So yes, many women are judged more harshly, and I was judged more harshly. Now, in my situation, Alina's father was not a Christian at all. He's still trying to figure out his relationship with God right now, but he is now becoming stronger in him and is trying to trust in him more. So I'm actually trying to get him into Wayfarers. But he is coming to God, and that's a great thing to see. Right. But
But at the time, he
at
wasn't.
the time, he was not. You know, he had a lot of anger towards Christians because there were a lot of Christians who treated him badly, and doing it all in the name of God. So, you know, he was hurt a lot by churches and Christians, and so he was one that was like, no, I'm not having anything to do with this, you know. But when he met me, he saw like, oh, you don't treat me like these other Christians do. Okay, this is cool, you know, type thing. Yeah. So, but yeah, and it's interesting because the church that I was working with, you know, at the time, if I would have gotten married to him, it would not have been so bad, apparently.
Yeah.
If I would have gotten married, because that's the, you know, obvious consensus, you know, you get pregnant, you get married, to kind of hide the whole thing of, yeah, you had sex before marriage, and so you sinned against God. So how do we fix that? We're going to get married right after we got pregnant so that we can kind of hide that.
Right.
Well, we didn't want to do that. You know, of course we loved each other, but we didn't want to just get married just because we got pregnant. You know, that's another big commitment, you know, and we weren't ready for that. Yeah. So yeah, I told the pastor, I was like, I'm not going to force this man to marry me. First of all, he's not Christian. Yeah. Second of all, he's doesn't believe in just getting married just because you got pregnant. So I'm not going to force him to do that. Yeah. You know, like he doesn't see it that way, and honestly I don't either. So then for that reason it was even worse. And so because we were not going to get married, that was one of the things that was like, okay, then you can't help us anymore type thing. So yes, then get, you know, and I don't know if men are just like, oh, well, it's okay if the man like has sex before marriage, but the woman, oh no, she can't. Well, that's kind of contradictory.
Yeah, because
you gotta, you gotta have a man and a woman to, have a baby. So I'm not sure, the thought process on that with different people, but it doesn't make sense to me.
The general consensus I hear is that men are going to always want sex and women are the gatekeepers. And so there's no changing the man's perspective. It's just how strong is the woman in keeping the man from sex, right? And so if it does happen, it's the woman's fault for not being a strong gatekeeper to the thing, because men can't change. That's the essential under assumption.
Yeah, that's like putting pressure on someone else to be responsible for someone else's behavior, which is not fair. Like, it's no woman's job to make sure that I'm
right.
It's like,
like Noah said, that's unfortunately been the way a lot of Christians have understood it. Is they have felt like men just can't control themselves, and so it shouldn't be their fault. I really think that's one of the most harmful things that the church has decided, because it goes both ways. You talked about when you were a teenager, you felt out of control,
right?
Yeah,
in a lot of the same ways that they say only men should supposedly feel out of control. So obviously it's not honest about how strong sexuality is as a temptation for all of us as human beings. I don't think it's honest to only let one gender get off the hook because of that.
Yeah. And I think that's also another part to that. I think one of the biggest issues in church is that we just try to cover up issues or cover up problems instead of dealing with it. So it's the idea that you're teaching men that, oh, it's a problem you can't control, so you don't have to control it. Don't worry about that.
Right.
And even the idea of not being able to be open and honest, because I know your reason was just like, I don't care, but it's like some people don't say that kind of stuff because they know they're going to be judged. And like, even going back to the issue of you need to get married, it's like the idea of trying to force a marriage that isn't supposed to be, just to cover up something that shouldn't have happened, but it created this beautiful child. So it's like the idea that we need to be taught to deal with things instead of just covering them up or sweeping them under the rug kind of thing. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I want to go back to the second question. What would you say to someone that acknowledges all those truths of the church doing that and favoring men over women and says, I don't want to do Christianity anymore because that's how churches are? What would you say to someone in that position?
I would say I understand.
Yeah.
I completely understand, because I had a moment when I almost was like, I'm just not gonna deal with these people. Like, I there was a short period of time that I didn't go to church because I was hurt and because I was depressed. And then, recently, after, like, short time after that, Alina's dad and I broke up, and so it was just a lot of hurt was going around. And so I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to deal with Christians. I didn't want to deal with people like that. But then 2 churches, Eastwind, and I'm going to say Wayfarers because you all were already talking about it and stuff.
Sure.
And honestly, you and Adrian, when you all came to the hospital, that showed me that, Christian people still care, and they're going to come see me after I've had this child, after I've done this thing that I'm not supposed to do, that, is shunned type thing. That was a really huge encouragement for me. And one of the things that really helped me to be like, okay, there are still Christian people that care. And I'm going to hold on to that because I need these people. I need people like that to help me and to support me. And it's been, you all, Eastwind, everybody from there has really been supportive and still is to this day.
I'm glad that was helpful to you, because I definitely, I remember, felt kind of guilty that we had lost touch in those years between Avenue Coffee and afterwards. And it was one of those things where I only heard through the grapevine everything that, was kind of going on. And so, yeah, whenever we heard that you were in the hospital and you had just had Alina, I'll definitely give Adrian a lot of the credit. She was like, we need to go and see Lizzy. And I remember agreeing with her. I was like, yeah, no, we definitely do.
Yeah.
I have a funny memory of that, I remember, because you kept trying to let me hold Alina.
Yes.
And I had this weird thing about, like, I'm never holding anybody's child. I had, like, never held a kid. Me and Noah talked about this a few days ago, because Noah has the same thing as me. Maybe it's just like a guy thing where you're just like, it's not my kid, I don't want to hold him. And I remember it was super awkward, but I kept trying to tell Lizzy, super happy for you, I don't want to hold her, I'm terrified I would, like, drop her or something.
See, I feel like I would always hold babies, but then I would always hold them wrong, so then they would cry, and then, like, their parents or someone had to be like, okay, you need to hold their head. And be granted, like, this may make me sound like a terrible person, but I have dropped slightly babies. Like, dropped someone's baby slightly.
See, there you go. That's why I didn't want to do it. So
Yeah.
I've had a lot more practice since then with Toby, so I'm more confident now.
There you go.
And it's a different situation, but yeah, I felt the same way. And that's always, I remember feeling extra awkward for so many reasons being there in the hospital with you, because I didn't want to hold the baby, and because I did feel guilty about not reaching out and not even kind of contacting you. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about personally recently, because I've had a few other situations with other friends where it is a shame how easy it is, even if you disagree with the decision somebody has made. Yeah. It's so easy to just take the easy way out, which is just like, well, I'm just going to cut ties. Mm-hmm. And you never say that to them. You just quit talking to them.
Yeah.
And I can hear from your story that was something you experienced over and over again with a lot of Christians. Is it's not even that they came and talked to you about, even if they thought something you were doing was wrong or something like that, they just quit talking to you.
Yeah.
And like I said, I would lump myself in that category and felt guilty about that. So that's why we wanted to kind of help reconnect in that way. Yeah. And I remember when you shared your story, because you shared a shorter version or a longer version, I guess not this long, but longer than the 1 minute version at the beginning of your story during one of our services a few months ago. And that was the first time I had heard you tell that part about your dad having the dream and, you know, how how much that meant to you. And I remember in that moment feeling extra guilty about the fact that, again, we had not had enough of a relationship for me to hear this awesome story that you have of kind of your experiences. So I guess I'm thankful that Adrian pushed me to get out of that so that we could go see you. And I'm glad that it did mean something to you in that way. And with the other Christians who did as well. Yeah. Maybe that could be the encouragement for us as we kind of leave here, because we're wrapping up here. We've got just a few minutes left here. Yeah. But maybe the encouragement that we could leave with is that, God really did make us to be together, to connect together, to connect with other humans. Being left out, being felt like you are marginalized in some way is unfortunately something so many of us feel. And maybe one of the most important things we can do as Christians, which seems so simple but is yet so hard, is to try to maintain connection with people, maintain those relationships with people, and notice the people that are feeling marginalized. Do you have anything you want to you really wanted to share before we finish out here? Any last parting thoughts?
I guess just for anybody who's dealing with this type of thing, or any kind of hard time where you feel like somebody has cut you off because of something you've done, I just want to encourage everybody that, God is still there, and there are still people who care. And we care, Wayfarers, we care. We really do. So if you really need a group of people who will just love on you and care about you, it's the place to be.
We are slightly awkward at it, but we do it.
We are a little awkward sometimes, but it's okay.
I just want to be real with y'all. Don't come in expecting us to be like, just.
It makes you feel more normal.
No.
Yeah, the awkwardness of me in the hospital room, not knowing how to hold a baby, just playing that definitely still has made its way into our Sunday services too. So
awkward people can unite at Wayfarers.
Yeah,
there you go.
But I agree. We're better at it sometimes than others. But I'm glad you felt that in some way, Lizzy, and I know that that's a desire we have, is to help other people feel that love and care, and maybe that connection that they're not feeling otherwise. Yeah. So I got to do my pastor pitch here at the end. If you wanna experience that in some way or another, we would love to see you. Definitely come hang out with us. Cool. We meet Sunday evenings and on the campus of Mid-South Christian College, where both of us went to school. Yeah. And I'm sure if you want to hear a little bit more about Lizzy's story, she would love to talk to you more. So you should come see her on a Sunday night. And for those of you that are listening that are already part of Wayfarers, I would encourage you, when you catch Lizzy at church on Sunday, tell her thank you for sharing the story with us, because I do think it's powerful. I think it's helpful to so many of us. I appreciate your vulnerability, because I know it's hard to talk about some of these kind of things because of all the Christian taboos that we have about a lot of this. Yeah. But I think it's helpful, and I want to thank you for doing that. And thank you to all of you who tuned in and listened as well. We will see y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.